106 miles to Chicago. We got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes. It's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it.
Hey everybody, Tom Barnes, stories from the 78, and I got a doozy for you. We're on a mission from God, Orange Whip, you know all of these things from the epic Blues Brothers movie. And I have my friend Daniel here, wrote this book about the Blues Brothers that just came out. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. Good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you. So I'm gonna hold up the book and I'll put a nice fancy graphic when I edit this. But this is the book for folks that want to know everything about Aykroyd, Belushi, how this epic movie came to be. And I can't believe it's over 40 years old already.
Yeah, 45 years ago that they were in Chicago filming it. Yeah.
That's incredible. So in this research that you've done, you've had different people comment on it. You went to the folks that dive into some of the history with Lorne Michaels at SNL, Belushi, Aykroyd. What was something that really stood out to you that was different, that you didn't know going into this, where you're like, wow, I had no idea. I'm glad I asked that one.
Well, so if you set out to write a book in the sort of narrative nonfiction universe where you're like telling a story, like an Eric Larson type thing, you're hoping, praying there will be some kind of drama in it, right? And I definitely didn't know when I started working on this that our hero, Belushi, or one of the two heroes, just about dies right in the middle of it. This would be the final week they were shooting in Chicago. This would be just before Halloween in October of 1979. He was partying.
What happened?
Well, he was partying really hard. I mean, and the dark side is he was also taking huge amounts of probably cocaine and I don't know what else, alcohol by the bottle at a time. And he overloaded his system so much that he basically overdosed. And twice during 1 week, this was the last week of filming, they had to break down the door to his room and basically revive him from, he'd overdosed to the point of almost dying. And as painful and horrible as that is, in narrative terms, in terms of storytelling, in hindsight, it becomes this kind of cliffhanger, like, my God, how are they going to finish making this movie? How are Belushi and Aykroyd going to see this through when Belushi is so bad off, so near death? And it's I mean, we all know how it's going to turn out, but the human brain, you can kind of like, you put it in a state of suspended animation and you kind of forget how it happens. If you're reading about like World War II or something, like, oh, are the good guys going to win? So it's that kind of thing. And I found that to be just fascinating and horrifying,
Right. And almost almost like a fortune teller moment of what was to come, unfortunately, for Mr. Belushi, right?
Yeah. There was just a review of my book that went up where the person who reviewed it said that Belushi is so much fun. I mean, the stuff he did is so funny. He was such an entertainer that you almost forget that it's going to end badly.
And it's really a tragedy that somebody so bright, was just gone. Like it took so suddenly, which I imagine digging up some of these memories for these people probably got a little emotional.
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, because everybody I talked to loved Belushi, and they've all been mourning him for 40 years. And just going back and going over all this stuff in great detail brought it all back for a lot of them. And so it was bittersweet, but everybody I interviewed knew that this book was, I mean, both recounting but also celebrating his work. And so I think they were cool with it. We're not back in the 80s trying to figure out why he died and stuff. Now
Sure.
It's just celebrating his legend,
Well, and speaking of celebrating legend, I read, and I think I might have heard it in another interview where, the old "we're on a mission from God" kind of has a double meaning in terms of like legendary musicians and shining a spotlight back on them, because in the 1970s, a lot of them kind of forgotten, I mean, disco was still doing its thing. You had what is now called classic rock that was also doing its thing, but kind of steered away from rhythm and blues, like the way that the blues was. And this was a great way, and I don't even think it would be humanly possible to, if we fast forward and everybody was still alive, to gather this many musicians in a movie like that, like they did in the Blues Brothers. It was an incredible thing to be able to showcase that spotlight.
Well, that was the genesis of the book. Was I was working on a book about BB King, a big, big biography, like 500-page biography of BB King, and I was almost done with it. And I had occasion to talk to John Landis, the director of Blues Brothers, say, "Well, hey man, why wasn't BB King in the Blues Brothers? He's the king of blues. Surely the Blues Brothers should have included the king of blues, right?" And Landis was like, "Oh, we tried. I tried to get him. We tried really hard, but alone out of all these stars, he was booked, he was busy, he was working regularly. He'd had a big resurgence in the late 70s thanks to the what's that great kind of fusion band that did a couple records. I'm not going to remember their name now, but it's a great fusion band that did a couple records with BB. Anyhow, it doesn't matter. I got talking to Landis, and next thing he said, "Well, Landis is a great storyteller." I was like, "Well, there was a secret, real mission from God." I'm like, "No, I didn't know there was a real, like, double secret mission from God." And he explained it to me. As you say, it was to revive the careers of the soul survivors who'd fallen on hard times, right? Aretha Franklin, James Brown, Ray Charles, certainly Calloway, all were on the shoals. If you look on like setlist.com and just look at where they were playing in 77 and 78. I mean, they were playing like minor, like, state fairs and dinner theaters, and not to cast aspersions, but smaller markets, right?
Sure.
For these legends of music. And so this movie, the secret mission that Aykroyd and Belushi were on in Landis was to revive their careers. That was the secret mission from God.
And that's incredible. That's like a fun trivia fact. I feel like, it's in terms of like lore of a movie, and this movie definitely has lore. From the chase scenes to the how. Did you ever get a count of how many cop cars were crashed driving through downtown? Is there an actual count?
You can Google it. It's like 100 and something, but I tell you, I know there weren't that many vehicles involved in the production, and they rebuilt them. They would repair them. They had like 60 cop cars that were remaindered, and they bought them cheap, like, I don't know, $500 a piece or something. And they'd smash them up like demolition derby, and then they'd take them to some shop out on the west side in a pretty high crime neighborhood and repair them,
Yeah.
and then roll them back onto the production. And so it was 100 whatever cars crashed, but it was actually 60 cars involved, I think. I'm pretty sure of that.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, and going through the process of, getting this book together, I read it's kind of serves as a biographical account for Aykroyd and Belushi in all this. What did you find in there that stood out to you, with their friendship, with getting this together? Because these guys are from they're not from, they didn't both grow up here. Belushi did in Chicago. Aykroyd's a Canadian. So how did that happen? How did that love of blues and these characters come about?
Well, we're lucky we have this movie, because the movie is the showcase, in addition to Aretha and James Brown and all these amazing marvels of rhythm and blues. It's also our best, by far, showcase for the friendship and the creative partnership of Aykroyd and Belushi, who were kind of like a Laurel and Hardy pair, or, like Barney Fife and Sheriff Andy, who I did a book about them several years ago. They're a great duo and a great friendship. They were best friends. But I hadn't really thought about this before I did the book. There's not really another showcase for their friendship. They were best friends all through the first, 4 or 5 seasons of Saturday Night Live and going into this film. But they didn't do a whole lot of work together on SNL. They were doing separate things for the most part. They were besties, but they were doing their own projects. Belushi with his Samurai, and Aykroyd with his Bass-O-Matic, and Irving Mainway and the Bag O' Glass and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So the Blues Brothers is a treasure because it captures this essence of their friendship. And the essence of their friendship is fascinating. They came up very similar. Belushi was outside Chicago. Aykroyd was in Ottawa. They both were kind of wiseacres who got first into drama and then into comedy. And both of them wound up in Second City, the great improv group, one in Chicago, the other in Canada. And they're both seeded into the first cast of SNL. So there's a ton in common between them, a ton that connects them. But there's also a lot of difference. I mean, just physically, there's a huge difference, right?
Yeah.
Tall and skinny and short and bulky. And then also one of them was like Mr. F it. I'm not going to break the FCC rule. And one of them was Mr. Careful. So Aykroyd was really disciplined and regimented and wrote like long backstories for all his characters and kept his wallet on a chain. And Belushi didn't even have a driver's license with him and would like walk across the border into Canada without any documentation and walked into the White House without any documentation, just Mr. F it all. So very different, but very similar.
Wow.
And that's kind of the essence of their friendship.
And that really truly was the essence of Belushi. You talk about the effort kind of scenario. Almost, I don't even know if it was like to be a rebel rouser. That's just kind of who he was, right?
He wasn't always that way. In high school in Wheaton, Illinois, which was a
Which is the Bible Belt of Illinois.
teetotaling city, yeah, and he was a teetotaling guy. He was a jock on the football team. He was like all county in the Tribune, and he literally turned in the quarterback for drinking beer. But yes,
Really?
John Belushi did that, yes. But he was at the
Wow, the
same
irony.
time was kind of this, he was kind of a bully, but he was kind of an anti-bully. He was like a bully who would beat up bigger bullies or smaller bullies. He was like a bully who would defend the downtrodden. So he was like an anti-bully, I guess. And so he had this overwhelming, already this big personality. And then he got into he turned into a hippie. He went and did summer theater in Shawnee, Indiana, and discovered beer and discovered weed and became a hippie and became kind of a stoner and then became a thespian and became a comedian. But he always had this big personality. And anytime he would walk on any stage, do his Joe Cocker impression, which he already had in like 1970 in Chicago. He developed it, when like the Joe Cocker, when those songs were on the radio in like 69, 70, that's when he developed these impressions. He was just big. And like Joe Flaherty told me, like, Belushi steps onto the stage at Second City and all the gravity sucks into him, basically. That was it for the other performers.
Yeah, it's tough to live up to, in terms of hit after hit. And, he had a couple of them up until the Blues Brothers, with Animal House and things before it. And his career was on the rise, and so was Aykroyd's. And you have this beautiful movie that portrays, like you said, their friendship, also showcasing Chicago in a way that's never been really seen up till that point, where the mayor at the time, Jane Burns, was kind of said, you know what, I don't really care what happened here before. I'm open for business. And so is the city. So much so that there might be, I don't know if they're called Easter eggs, but it's interesting what they destroy in the movie in terms of political past in Chicago.
Well, the Chris Borelli at the Tribune laid the groundwork for this, but he interviewed Byrne while she was still alive, Jane Byrne. And so from that work, I know, and I kind of dredged up and marched out this story. So Mayor Daley had shut down filming in Chicago. This is the elder Mayor Daley, the one who never uttered a grammatically correct sentence. And he basically shut down the city to filming in the mid-50s because some production came in and like had like corrupt cops, and Daley didn't like it. So he said, okay, no more filming. So when I was a kid in Chicago, what was there? There was like My Bodyguard and like Cooley High School, but there weren't really Chicago films. And Jane Byrne reopened it, and it was partly out of, I think, some animus she had toward Daley, because Daley's cronies, I remember this, would like badmouth her and say sexist stuff and call her skinny B, and horrible stuff. And Royko, I remember Royko was kind of trash and just being sexist, being misogynist. First female mayor, and Daley's cronies didn't like her. So when these guys come into town, it's like, well, we want to roll a convoy across Richard J. Daley Plaza. She's like, great,
Destroyed the plaza. Go ahead, it's fine.
Be my guest, but don't harm the Picasso. I wish they had harmed the Picasso. I've always hated the Picasso. It was this weird like aardvark with a gas mask on.
It is a strange looking thing for sure, especially when you have to explain it to people who are visiting from out of town.
What exactly is this supposed to be? And it was unveiled during a very polluted like time in Chicago. The air wasn't all that clean, so it looked like this like nightmare of like urban decay or something.
So I imagine it wasn't much of a persuading act to get them to kind of film wherever they wanted to. I mean, they're dropping cars out of the sky. They're in Marquette Park, with the neo-Nazi march. I mean, they were all over the city, and even up in Lake Geneva, I think was that big auditorium at the end of the movie.
They were shutting down sections of Chicago at times, which I would argue, well, they said that it would not have been conceivable in New York or LA at the time to shut down like again, Lakeshore Drive, or like Lake Street or like Lower Wacker or the westbound expressway. I can't remember now what it's called, for like, our entire day.
Eisenhower.
The Eisenhower. Yeah. I was never really a driver in Chicago. That's the one part of the city I don't really remember because I didn't drive. I got my driver's license at like 25. Anyway, so they were allowed carte blanche, and everybody in town knew this was happening. Chicago had, at least then, this small town feel that like everyone in town knew that Belushi was there and that they were making the Blues Brothers, and nobody cared. They just shut it down, and like every other Sunday, like, we're making the movie. And they destroyed this mall, which had already been shut down. They like rebuilt it this Dixie Mall. They rebuilt it very painstakingly and put in all new stuff. And then they destroyed it again. And they did I think $3 million worth of filming and damage on Dealey Plaza. And that's $1979. And yeah, they wreaked havoc. And out in Milwaukee folks love this movie. Like, they love the Blues Brothers, and it's really just that one scene of the car going off the edge of the roadway is all they filmed in Milwaukee. But it's a huge deal up there. I was up there doing a book event, and they love the Blues Brothers, and that's just for that one little scene.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that Milwaukee tie-in of them loving, because there's a nice rivalry between Milwaukee and the folks from Chicago. And if you don't know, they call us fibs. Have you ever heard of that term before?
No.
Effing Illinois bastards.
Well, everybody was lovely when I was up there, and I had just come from the Writers Museum in Chicago for my launch event, and they were, at least at the time, were loving Chicago and were loving the Blues Brothers. So at least the people who were at Boswell's Books that night love you guys.
Right. No, I should preface, it's more of the summer folks in Wisconsin in general, because a lot of folks in Chicago like to go up north, and we drive. Yeah, that's fair. Do you have a favorite line in the movie?
I have a whole bunch, and the thing is, I want to say it would probably, see, the thing is, a lot of the lines aren't Belushi or Aykroyd, and then you got to think, well, who am I going to show my allegiance to? Jake and Elwood? I mean, that 106 Miles to Chicago is brilliant.
Yeah.
But also just Aretha saying she, is amazing. I mean,
or Ray Charles saying he'll throw the black keys in for free. I love that line. Or, and we didn't even talk about this, John Candy's in the movie. Like, he's the Orange Whip. Orange Whip. I mean, unbelievable.
But I was talking to one of your peers in podcasting the other day. It's not the funniest movie in the world. I think it's hilarious, but The Blues Brothers is a classic for a mix of comedy and drama and musicality and a whole bunch of different stuff. It's way more than just a comedy film. Like Caddyshack might be like scene per scene a little funnier. Maybe Airplane line by line is a bit funnier, but Blues Brothers has just sudden and explosive humor. Nothing funny. Nothing in the movie is funnier than Belushi turning to the family at the Shea Paul and saying, "How much for the women?" That I always crack up when I hear that. But the movie is so much more than just funny, right? It's a gigantic production.
Yeah, it's over the top, it's explosive, but as you mentioned, the stuff that is funny, the timing is just spot on. It's almost like it had to improv a lot of it. They might have gotten direction, but some of that stuff I had to have just been, improv. I mean, I love the line where he literally says, you can't lie to a penguin, or you can't lie to a nun, rather, not a penguin. That's what they call her. But, stuff like that, it just seems like a lot of it might have been just, winging it at the time, and I'm curious to see if you heard any of that.
It was. And like Tom Morello, the great guitarist, put up on Twitter the shot with the Nazis being blown off the bridge which a lot of people love that shot, just the revenge porn aspect of that, bailing on the Nazis. And so the cop who, says, hey, what's going on? What is that? He's the F, he says the effing Nazi party. That was ad lib. And it's just this moment where everybody watching the film was like, yeah, God damn them, it's a great moment.
Party.
There's a lot of little improvised things. Also, a lot of stuff that was added to the script kind of at the last minute. I kept asking Landis, the director, about where did this line come in? When did this line come in? And a lot of it isn't in the script, but a lot of it either was added, in take 1 or take 5 or take 10, or just at the last moment. They came up with a lot of it as they went along, basically.
And how do they marry all of it together in terms of like the performances with these amazing stars, like Aretha Franklin, or the scene where it is Ray Charles out in the neighborhood doing this number? Was that also part of it, or was that just stuff that they kind of added? Like, well, if we're gonna have Ray Charles, let's just do a whole thing, or the think in the diner with Aretha, or the church with James Brown. I mean, people are doing flips in the air, which makes no sense. All of a sudden, you cut over and you see people flying through the midair, and you're just like going with it. Do these guys even know how to dance?
Well, a lot of this was scripted. They knew they wanted to have Aretha Franklin to play Matt Guitar Murphy's wife, and they got her. Luckily, they originally wanted Little Richard to play the preacher, and I'm sure that was Landis and Aykroyd were thinking, well, Little Richard is a preacher.
Yeah, that's right.
And Landis went and met with him, but it turned out he was on his own mission from God and couldn't be taken from his church to be in this movie, which he probably thought was blasphemous, And so I'm pretty sure, so like the Maxwell Street scene, they just wanted in the original Dan Aykroyd script, which is like 5,000 pages long, they wanted 2 guys with a pig nose amp playing on the street. Well, that wound up to be, then it was going to be John Lee Hooker, it was going to be Muddy Waters. They got both of them to be in it. Those were going to be the guys. And then at the last minute, Muddy was ill, so he had to cancel and pull out. So then it wound up being John Lee Hooker and the band. So a lot of the stuff evolved, and I think Cab Calloway was going to be Curtis, the mentor all along. And and Ray Charles, I think he was the first choice to play that character who sells them their gear. And the sight gag of him firing the gun at the guy who's trying to shoplift is pretty funny. A lot of that was who they knew these guys were.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk to you for hours about this movie because there's so much to cover. I appreciate your time. What was your final takeaway from just uncovering all these people or stories from all these people? Like, was there something outside of what you talked about, with Belushi almost dying during the filming of it just because of his parting ways? But is there something that somebody said to you that really stuck with you in terms of their memory of the movie making of it, or Belushi or Aykroyd?
Gosh,
or Belushi or Aykroyd himself?
Yeah, I guess I came to really understand the 2 men at the center of the story much better. I knew Belushi like any fan knew Belushi, like he's Bluto, from Animal House. And, I came away with this from this with a much better understanding of who he was. He was a really intensely caring person, really protective. Like I remember 3, 4, 5 different women I interviewed who were performers who worked with Belushi told me how sweet he was and would just be so protective of them and like, hey, is your boyfriend giving you a hard time? I'll beat him up. I'll kick his ass. Things like that. Just a sweetness to him. Like he was like this tough older brother.
Proper Midwestern boy.
And in Aykroyd's case, all these stories, like one of his Canadian, again, fellow performers was telling me about how he could be so civilized and so erudite. And he lived in this like Victorian with his family who were these old world British Canadians. And but he was also like underworld and like would hang out with crooks and stuff and hang out with like truckers and like off-duty cops. So this woman who was one of his fellow performers would be like, yeah, you'd show up at his house and be like, well, welcome. And, how wonderful to see you. Would you like a joint? And that Aykroyd's ultimate fantasy is he wanted to rob a bank and then arrest himself because he's like really into cops and law enforcement, but also really into the seedy underside.
Well, I mean, that you kind of just described parts of the Blues Brothers. You see the seedy underside, yes, for sure, and also the cops and robbers, the chase scenes, and I mean, it's just the movie. It's such a wonderful account that you found in the pages of your book. So, as a fan who has been a fan of the movie since I can remember as a kid, I mean, I have a Blues Brother poster in my high school bedroom, my dorm room in college, made it all the way. It's still in my basement of my house,
Oh,
and subtle Blues Brother things throughout my house that people who only know the movie would know. But I'll leave you with one story. I don't know if you know this, and maybe you do. Are you familiar with the Chicago flag?
the Chicago what now?
The flag of the city of
Oh yeah,
Chicago.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Have you heard about how the flag got to be as well known as it is?
I mean, it's funny. I don't even know for sure what the DC flag looks like, and I live outside DC, but I've always known the Chicago flag. No, I don't know its origin story.
So I'll get really quick. So there's a gentleman, and his name is Mark, and he owns the store The Alley, and it used to be right
Yeah,
by Wrigley Field. Okay,
I used to
yeah,
buy I used to buy old military stuff there.
exactly. So during the after Belushi had passed, Aykroyd, of course, everybody is just devastated, and The Alley at that point had a reputation that you can buy anything that was cop related, military related,
Yeah,
because it was
yeah.
like a punk rock store. It was a screw, stick it to the man store. So Mark Thomas, I believe his name is, tells a story. Belushi comes into The Alley, and he talks to him. He's like, I need to wear something for John's funeral, and I want something Chicago. So Mark says, well, I have these policeman jackets, except the only thing on it is just the Chicago flag. There's these black leather jackets. He's like, yeah, that seems perfect. It's my honor to John. So he sells him the jacket. Well, there's a photo that went, if you can use the word viral back then, and it's the photo of Belushi's, the hearse, and it's Aykroyd on a Harley Davidson,
Yeah,
black
yeah,
Harley,
yeah,
wearing the jacket and the Chicago flag on it. And
yeah.
that slowly turned into people started coming into The Alley saying, hey, I want that jacket that Belushi was wearing, um, because not Belushi, I'm sorry,
Aykroyd,
Aykroyd
Aykroyd.
was wearing,
Yeah.
sorry, long day,
No, I know
that
that I
Aykroyd
know
was
what you meant.
wearing, yeah, because I want to honor Belushi that way as well. And so it just kind of trickled and trickled and trickled. But the essence of that story, it came from The Alley in Chicago, because he sold the leather jacket, specifically a leather black jacket with the Chicago patch on the side. And that, I think it was in the Tribune, and then it went to maybe a bigger magazine, a national magazine. But that's how the flag got its popularity back then, and it has only gotten more and more popular ever since.
I was at the alley regularly as a teenager and bought innumerable kind of ironic military garments there. I was trying to explain to my daughter, who's like 22, that back in when I was young, that oftentimes if you're wearing military stuff, it was like an ironic statement. It didn't mean you were necessarily pro-army. You might just as likely be anti-war. It could be
Yeah,
either, but yeah, so I got a lot of stuff there over the years.
yeah, it's a cool thing. And if you ever go back in the alley's still there, it just moved. But Mark is still the owner, and it's over in Avondale now, which is kind of just a little bit west of where it used to be. But he told me that story a couple years ago, and I thought it was one of the coolest stories I've ever heard of Chicago lore. So I'll leave you with that. Where can folks buy your book, sir?
Oh, well, Seminary Books in Chicago has signed copies. And a bunch of other bookstores in greater Chicagoland have them. And if you're outside of Chicago, there's a few indie bookstores like Fountain Books in Richmond and Acapella in Atlanta that also have signed copies. And I'm forgetting a couple. Oh, Politics and Prose in DC. But barring that, of course, you can get them on Amazon or at a independent bookstore of your choosing.
Well, you know what? It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you, and thanks a bunch for doing again what you've done in collaborating to get all these stories down in the book. It's the Blues Brothers. Yeah, and the full title. Give me the full title, because I know it's the Blues
Oh, I'm gonna
Brothers.
forget it. Hold on, I got to get my coffee stained book here. It's the Blues Brothers, an epic friendship, the rise of improv, and the making of an American film classic. And don't spill coffee on your version of it.
Uh, Fantastic. Thank you so much for taking time to chat with me.
Hey, thank you, man.